My finance director destroyed my career with payroll lies. I brought down the entire scheme. If only they knew what he did to the payroll. I stood in the glass conference room while HR slid printed spreadsheets across the table. Numbers highlighted in red.
My name typed neatly at the top.
Outside the glass, my coworkers stared. Someone whispered. Someone shaked their head. I couldn't breathe. I kept saying the same sentence over and over. I didn't do this. But it landed flat, rehearsed, guilty. Then I saw him through the glass. Paul Whitaker.
Calm.
Still. Watching. Not defending me. Not surprised. Just waiting. And in that moment, something inside me broke. Not my spirit.
My trust.
My belief that good work and honest effort meant something. The spreadsheets sat there like accusations. The HR manager, Helen, cleared her throat. My hands were shaking. I couldn't stop them. Paul turned away from the glass and walked toward the elevators. He didn't look back. That's when I knew.
He'd planned this.
Every single number. Every highlighted cell. Every moment of this humiliation. And he was already gone. They walked me past my desk while my inbox locked mid-refresh. I watched the screen freeze. One email half-loaded. The cursor blinking. Then nothing. My badge stopped working before I reached the exit. I swiped it at the security gate. The red light blinked.
Error.
Access denied. The guard looked embarrassed. He knew me. We'd said good morning every day for 3 years. Now he had to escort me out like I was dangerous. The shame was instant.
Public.
Surgical. The kind that doesn't just cost you your job. It rewrites how people remember you. People I'd helped with their timesheets. People I'd stayed late to fix payroll errors for. They watched me leave. Some looked away. Some stared. I heard someone say my name. Not kindly. My name is Megan Walsh. And that was the day everyone decided I was a thief. I wasn't. But facts don't matter when the story's already written. Months earlier, Paul arrived like relief. Our payroll had been a disaster for weeks. Paychecks late. Benefits messy. Morale fragile.
People were scared.
Some were genuinely struggling. Then Paul walked in with his calm voice and organized folders. He fixed things gently, efficiently, without ego. Paychecks stabilized within days. Raises appeared on time. Employees started trusting him because he made the chaos quiet. I trusted him because he listened to me. Really listened. And he praised my attention to detail. I'd been working in payroll operations for 5 years. I knew the system inside and out. When tiny discrepancies started appearing, I assumed they were mistakes. Rounding errors. System glitches. When I mentioned them to Paul, he smiled and said he'd look into it. And for a while, everything seemed fine. Better than fine. Paul made everyone feel safe.
Including me.
That was his first weapon. Safety. The illusion that someone competent was finally in charge. But the errors never disappeared. They moved. I noticed them in lower-paid staff first. Overtime workers. People who wouldn't notice $20 missing here, 40 there. I felt it before I proved it. A wrongness in the numbers. A pattern no one wanted to see. When I tried to raise concerns casually, I was told I was stressed. Emotional. Imagining problems where none existed. Paul defended me publicly. He told managers I was dedicated. Thorough. Maybe too thorough. He smiled when he said it. That made doubting him feel impossible. How could I accuse someone who stood up for me? Someone who made my job easier? Someone everyone respected? So I stayed quiet. I watched. I kept spreadsheets at home. Nothing official. Just notes.
Dates. Amounts.
Names of employees whose paychecks didn't match their hours. It wasn't proof yet, but it was something. And that something kept growing. Quietly.
Steadily.
Like mold behind a clean wall. By the time I understood the truth, it was too late. Paul hasn't stolen money in the obvious way. He'd engineered harm that looked legal, clean, and compliant. And when I got too close, he didn't threaten me. He erased me. But what Paul didn't know was this. The system remembers more than people do. And I remembered everything. Every conversation. Every time he asked me not to double-check a report. Every time access permissions changed without explanation. Every time an employee came to me confused about their paycheck, and I had to tell them everything looked correct because I couldn't see what I used to see anymore. I remembered the single mother who lost her benefits without explanation. The night shift worker whose overtime vanished from the system. The way Paul's smile never reached his eyes when I asked questions. I remembered. And now I had nothing left to lose. The day they fired me, I sat in my car in the parking garage for an hour. My hands still shaking. My phone buzzing with texts I couldn't read. I stared at the steering wheel and felt rage replace shock. Pure, cold, clarifying rage. How did this happen? How did I go from dedicated employee to accused criminal in one meeting? I replayed every moment, every spreadsheet, every red number. They'd show me evidence I knew I hadn't created. But the timestamps were real. The edits were real. My user ID was attached to every single fraudulent change. It was impossible. And yet there it was. Printed. Highlighted. Presented as fact. I thought about Paul's face through the glass. That calm, waiting expression. He'd known this was coming. He'd probably known for weeks. Maybe months. While I was documenting his crimes, he was framing me for them. The perfect setup. The dedicated employee who notices too much becomes the scapegoat who did too much. My name is Megan Walsh. I'm 32 years old. I have a degree in business administration and 5 years of payroll operations experience.
I was good at my job.
I loved my job. I loved the precision of it. The way numbers told stories if you knew how to read them. The way a perfect payroll run meant people could pay rent, buy groceries, plan their lives. I took pride in that. Real pride. When the company hired Paul 6 months ago, I was relieved. Our previous finance director had quit suddenly. Left everything in chaos. No documentation. No transition plan.
Just gone.
We were drowning. Employees were panicking. Management was scrambling. Then Paul arrived. Quiet confidence. Steady hands. Within his first week, he'd stabilized the payroll system. Cleared the backlog. Fixed the broken benefits portal. People started breathing again. Including me. I thought we were lucky to have him. I actually said that out loud. We're so lucky. I wish I could take those words back. Paul asked me to assist him directly in his second week. He said he needed someone who knew the system. Someone detail-oriented. Someone he could trust. I felt seen.
Valued.
I stayed late helping him understand our custom payroll software. I walked him through every quirk and workaround. I showed him where the previous director had cut corners. Where errors tended to hide. Paul listened carefully. Took notes. Asked smart questions. Then one Friday, he asked me to stop double-checking one specific report. The contractor payments report. He said it was creating delays. That he'd verified the numbers himself. That my thoroughness, while appreciated, was slowing down critical approvals.
He said it so gently.
So reasonably. I felt embarrassed for being overcautious. So I stopped checking that report. That was my first. Not because I should have doubted him, but because that report was where it all started. The contractors who didn't exist. The payments that went nowhere. The money that disappeared into accounts I'd never see. The first missing dollars appeared 3 weeks later. Tiny amounts. A night security guard's overtime was short by $18. A warehouse worker's holiday pay was missing $32. I noticed because I still reviewed the final payroll summary, even though Paul told me I didn't need to. Old habits. I flagged it to Paul casually. Sent him an email with the discrepancies highlighted. He responded within an hour. Thanked me for catching it. Said it was a rounding error in the new system update. Fixed it immediately. The employees got their money, the next pay period. I felt good. Like I'd helped. Like the system was working. But 2 weeks later, it happened again. Different employees. Similar amounts. Always hourly workers. Always people whose paychecks varied week to week. People who might not notice $20 or $40 missing among changing shift differentials and overtime calculations. I flagged it again. Paul fixed it again. smiled, said the system was still settling, that these things take time. And I believed him. Because why wouldn't I? I started mapping the errors privately. Nothing official, just a personal spreadsheet on my laptop at home.
Dates.
Employee names.
Amounts.
How long it took to fix. I wasn't suspicious yet, just thorough. It's how my brain works. I see patterns. And the pattern I was seeing was systematic. The errors always affected the same type of employee. Lower wage. Variable hours. Multiple deductions. The kind of paycheck that's complicated enough that a small discrepancy gets lost in the noise. And the fixes were always just slow enough. Never immediate. Always next pay period. Always after the employee had already struggled for 2 weeks. I showed my findings to one colleague, Marcus from accounting. He laughed it off. Said I was overthinking it. That payroll systems are messy. That Paul was doing a great job compared to the last director. He said I should relax. Stop looking for problems. I felt foolish. Paranoid. So I closed my spreadsheet and tried to let it go. Then Angela broke down crying at her desk. Angela was a single mother, 2 kids, worked in customer service. She came to me during lunch, shaking, asking why her health insurance had been canceled. I checked the system. Her benefits were active. Everything looked fine. But her insurance company said she'd been dropped for non-payment. The premium had never been deducted from her paycheck. Except it had. I could see the deduction in the system. Every pay period for 3 months. The money had been taken from her check. But it had never reached the insurance company. I escalated it to Paul immediately. He looked concerned. Promised to investigate. Said it was probably a vendor error. A bank routing issue. He fixed it within a week. Angela got her coverage back. But I couldn't stop thinking about those 3 months of missing premiums. Where did that money go? I tried to check the payment history, the detailed transaction logs. But my access had changed. I couldn't see what I used to see. The system had been reorganized. My permissions quietly adjusted. And Paul had approved every single change. I asked Paul about the access restrictions during our next one-on-one meeting. Kept my tone casual. He explained that the new structure was more secure, better for compliance, that I didn't need transaction-level access for my role, that it would actually make my job easier, less to worry about, more focused. He said it like he was doing me a favor, and maybe I should have pushed back harder. But I was tired. The job had been chaotic for months. The idea of a smaller, clearer scope sounded almost nice. So I nodded, accepted it, went back to my desk. That night, I tried to access the contractor payment files from home.
Just to see.
Access denied. I tried the benefits reconciliation database. Denied. I tried the audit trail logs. Denied. Every door I used to walk through was now locked. And I hadn't even noticed it happening. Paul had been trimming my access for weeks. So gradually. So reasonably. One permission at a time. Until I was working blind. I raised my concerns to leadership during a department meeting.
Carefully.
Professionally. I said I'd noticed some patterns in payroll discrepancies. That I thought we might need an independent review. Just to be safe. Paul didn't get defensive.
He supported me. Publicly.
Said my attention to detail was exactly why he valued me on the team. That he'd welcome any review. That transparency was critical. Management loved him for it. The CFO actually thanked him for fostering such a thorough team culture. I felt like I'd made a fool of myself. Like I'd accused someone of something terrible and he'd responded with grace. But then HR scheduled a review. Not of the payroll system. Of me. They called it a performance calibration. A chance to ensure I was supported in my role. That I wasn't experiencing burnout. That my concerns were being addressed appropriately. The meeting was next week. Paul sent me a supportive email. Said he'd be there to back me up. That we were a team. I should have run then. Should have gathered everything I had and disappeared. But I didn't. I stayed. Because I still thought the truth mattered. Paul pulled me aside after the department meeting. His voice was gentle. Almost sad. He said I was digging myself into a hole. That my concerns were valid, but My approach was becoming obsessive, that people were starting to worry about me. He said it like a friend, like someone who cared, but his eyes were cold, watchful. It was a warning, delivered with a smile. I felt ice run down my spine. That night, I backed up every file I could still access. Payroll summaries, employee data, system logs, anything that might prove what I was seeing. I saved it to a personal USB drive.
Hid it in my apartment.
It wasn't much. My access was already too restricted. But it was something. Proof that the discrepancies existed. Proof that they followed a pattern. Proof that I'd been trying to fix them. 3 days later, the company announced an IT security audit. External auditors. Full system review. I thought it was because of my concerns. I thought maybe someone had listened. I was wrong. It was the trap closing. The auditors cleared the system in 2 weeks. Found nothing. No irregularities. No missing payments. No evidence of fraud. I read the report 3 times. It was thorough, professional, and completely wrong. But how could I argue with external auditors? With certified professionals who had no reason to lie? I started doubting myself. Maybe I was seeing patterns that weren't there. Maybe stress had made me paranoid. Maybe Paul was right, and I was obsessing over nothing. Then I found my name in an internal report, a compliance document I wasn't supposed to see. It had been accidentally CC'd to the whole finance team. Someone recalled it within minutes. But I'd already downloaded it. The report outlined concerns about a payroll operations specialist who had been making unauthorized system changes, who had been accessing employee data outside normal business hours, who had been resisting new security protocols. The specialist wasn't named, but the employee ID was mine. The document was dated 3 weeks ago, before I'd ever raised concerns publicly. Before the audit, before any of this became official, Paul had been building this case against me for weeks, maybe months, and I'd never seen it coming. I couldn't sleep that night. I read the compliance report over and over. Every line was technically true and completely misleading. Yes, I'd made system changes, because that was my job. Yes, I'd accessed employee data after hours, because I was fixing payroll errors. Yes, I'd questioned new security protocols, because they were limiting my ability to do my work. But the report made it sound sinister, suspicious, like I was hiding something. The language was careful, legal. It didn't accuse me of anything specific. It just raised concerns, created doubt, established a timeline that made me look guilty. I thought about going to HR, but what would I say? That I'd found a document that technically described my job duties but made them sound criminal? That I thought my boss was framing me but I had no proof? They'd think I was paranoid, unstable, exactly what the report suggested. So, I did the only thing I could think of. I took a screenshot of one payroll run. One single snapshot showing the contractor payments that didn't match the vendor invoices. It wasn't smoking gun evidence, but it was something. I saved it to a cloud drive under a fake account. Then I waited. The call from HR came the next morning. Helen from HR was professional, kind even. She asked me to bring my laptop and phone to the conference room. I knew what was happening. I'd seen this process from the other side. The gentle tone, the private room, the request to hand over company property before you know why. I gave them everything. My laptop unlocked, my phone powered on, my badge placed neatly on the table. Then they showed me the spreadsheets. Payroll files edited under my user ID. Changes made after hours. Money redirected to accounts I'd supposedly set up. Timestamps. IP addresses. Digital fingerprints that all pointed to me. I kept saying I didn't do this. But the evidence was overwhelming. And I couldn't explain it. Because I didn't understand how he'd done it. How Paul had made the system believe I was the one making fraudulent changes. How he'd used my credentials, my access, my good work against me. They terminated me for financial misconduct, escorted me out immediately, started an investigation that would clear Paul and destroy me. And through the glass, I saw him watching.
Calm. Still.
waiting for me to disappear. I spent 3 days in my apartment. Curtains closed. Phone off. I couldn't eat.
Couldn't think.
I'd lost everything.
My job.
My reputation. My ability to work in this field ever again. Once you're accused of payroll fraud, you're done. No one will hire you. No one will trust you. The story follows you forever. On the 4th day, someone knocked on my door. I almost didn't answer. But the knocking was persistent, gentle but insistent. I looked through the peephole. An older woman I didn't recognize. She held up a business card to the peephole. Claire Hoffman, former payroll auditor. I opened the door. Claire didn't waste time. She said she'd worked for our company 3 years ago, that she'd been fired under similar circumstances, that Paul had done this before.
To her.
To at least 2 others she knew of. She said he moved between companies, stayed 2 to 3 years, built trust, then engineered small-scale fraud that looked legal, skimmed money through contractor payments, benefits timing, and system delays, just enough to enrich himself without triggering major audits. And when someone noticed, he framed them, used their access, their credentials, made them the villain while he played the hero who cleaned up their mess. Claire and I spent 6 hours at my kitchen table. She showed me everything. Articles about Paul's previous companies, employee reviews mentioning mysterious payroll issues, patterns of mid-level staff fired for financial misconduct. All women, all detail-oriented, all people who'd questioned him. She explained his method. He'd gain system administrator access early, create ghost user sessions that mimicked real employees, use those sessions to make fraudulent changes that appeared to come from someone else's login. The real employee never knew their credentials were being spoofed. The system showed their user ID, their IP address through VPN routing, perfect digital frames. And because the fraud was small-scale, spread across hundreds of employees over months, it never triggered the kind of audit that would reveal the ghost sessions. The external auditors checked for big theft, missing millions, not missing 20s, not benefits premiums redirected, not overtime shaved by 2%. That kind of harm is invisible until it's not, until someone like me or Claire starts asking questions. Then we become the problem, the threat, the one who has to go. I asked Claire why she was helping me. She said she'd tried fighting it alone, hired a lawyer, filed complaints, but without proof. She looked like a disgruntled employee making excuses. The system protected Paul automatically because the system believed logs, timestamps, digital evidence, and Paul controlled all of it. She'd given up eventually, taken a settlement, signed an NDA, moved on with her life. But she'd kept watching, kept tracking. When she saw my name in a local business journal article about our company's improved payroll efficiency under Paul's leadership, she knew. She knew he'd found his next target. And she couldn't stay quiet anymore. I asked her what I could do. The company had already fired me. The investigation was closed. Paul had won. She leaned forward, her eyes sharp. She said there was one thing Paul couldn't control. One part of the system he didn't fully understand because he wasn't an actual payroll expert. He was a fraudster who learned just enough to be dangerous. Emergency system continuity protocols. The failsafe that kicks in when primary access is compromised. And I still had the credentials to trigger it. Claire explained that every payroll system has a backup verification process. If the primary system shows signs of compromise, a secondary audit protocol can be manually triggered. It forces the system to recalculate everything from original source data, time cards, vendor invoices, benefits elections, bank records, the raw truth. It bypasses all the edited logs and user session data, goes straight to the foundation. The problem is it requires authorization from 2 sources. A current employee with payroll access and a former employee with administrative knowledge. Claire still had her old credentials. They'd never been fully deactivated. And I still had my emergency backup login. The one they give you on your first day in case the main system goes down. The one nobody remembers exists. We could trigger a full system recalculation. Force it to compare every payment made in the last 2 years against original documentation. It would expose every discrepancy, every ghost session, every fraudulent edit. But it would also alert Paul immediately. He'd know someone was digging. He'd try to shut it down. We'd have maybe 4 hours before he could override it. 4 hours for the system to process 2 years of payroll data and generate a compliance report. 4 hours to prove everything. Or lose forever. We triggered it at 2 in the morning. Claire's kitchen. 2 laptops. VPN connections routing through 3 different servers. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely type. But I entered my credentials. Claire entered hers. The system accepted both. A warning screen appeared. Emergency audit protocol initiated. System recalculation in progress. Estimated completion, 4 hours. We watched the progress bar. 1%. 2%. I kept expecting error messages. System lockouts. Paul's face appearing in some digital alert. But nothing happened. The system just processed. Methodically. Quietly. Recalculating every paycheck. Every deduction. Every payment. Comparing it all against original source documentation. At 3%, the first discrepancies appeared. Contractor payments with no matching invoices. At 7%, benefits premiums deducted but never transmitted. At 15%, overtime hours that existed in time cards but vanished from paychecks. By 20%, the system had flagged over 300 irregularities. By 40%, it was over 1,000. The numbers kept growing. And somewhere across town, I imagined Paul's phone starting to buzz. Alert after alert. The system he'd corrupted was now exposing him. And there was nothing he could do to stop it. The recalculation completed at 6:14 in the morning. Claire and I hadn't slept. We'd just watched numbers accumulate on the screen. Waiting. The final report was devastating. $2.3 million in fraudulent transactions over 18 months. Money skimmed through payroll errors, benefits timing, and ghost contractor accounts. Every transaction traced back to administrative sessions that appeared to come from legitimate users, but actually originated from spoofed credentials. My credentials. Claire's old credentials. 2 other former employees who'd been fired. Paul had used all of us. Made the system think we were criminals while he stole millions in tiny, invisible increments. The report automatically forwarded to the company's compliance office, the CFO, and the external audit firm. By 7 a.m., my phone started ringing. Unknown numbers. I didn't answer. At 8:15, the company's head of legal called. Left a voicemail asking me to come in. Immediately. Said there had been developments. That they needed to speak with me urgently. At 9 a.m., Paul's office line was disconnected. His email bounced. And the company released an internal memo about an ongoing investigation. I went to the office with Claire and a lawyer we'd hired that morning. Employment law specialist who understood digital fraud cases. The conference room was full. The CFO. The head of legal. Helen from HR. 2 people from the external audit firm. And Paul. He looked wrong. His calm was cracking. His hands kept moving.
Touching his tie.
His collar. The table. He saw me, and something flickered across his face. Not anger.
Fear.
They walked through the findings. The recalculation report. The ghost sessions. The spoofed credentials. Paul tried to explain. Said the system must have been hacked. That someone external had compromised it. That he'd been investigating irregularities himself. But then they showed him the logs. His real logs. The administrator access he'd granted himself on day 3. The backup sessions he'd created using other people's credentials. The timing of every fraudulent transaction matching his work hours. His real work hours. Not the spoofed timestamps. He contradicted himself 3 times. Tried to blame the previous finance director. Then the IT department. Then me again. But the numbers didn't lie.
And he taught me that.
Numbers tell stories if you know how to read them. His story was over. They terminated him immediately. Escorted him out by security. Started criminal proceedings. Froze his accounts. And then they turned to me. I waited for another accusation, another frame, but the head of legal apologized.
Formally.
Said they'd been wrong, that my termination was voided, that I'd be compensated for damages. I didn't feel victorious, just tired. 3 months later, I returned to the company, not as a payroll specialist, as an external compliance consultant. They'd hired me to rebuild the entire payroll verification system, to train staff on recognizing fraud patterns, to implement safeguards that would prevent another Paul. I accepted because the work mattered, because those employees deserved protection, because someone needed to fix what he'd broken. The first thing I did was run reports on every employee affected by Paul's fraud, calculated what they'd lost, overtime payments, benefits coverage, correct tax withholdings. The company issued restitution checks. Some people got thousands, others got a few hundred, but every person got a letter, an apology, an explanation. Angela from customer service cried when she got hers. Said she thought she was going crazy, that she'd questioned her own memory. I told her she wasn't crazy, that her instincts were right, that the system had failed her, but wouldn't again. Paul was awaiting trial, facing multiple fraud charges. Claire testified. I testified. 4 other former employees came forward. The case was solid. He'd spend years in prison. And every day I thought about that moment in the glass conference room,
When I saw him watching.
waiting for me to break. If only he knew the system he used to erase people would remember everything. And sometimes, the people remember too.